Good evening and welcome to another Squawk Talk on Socialist Telly. And tonight I'm delighted to be joined by Glynis Millward and Lily Boulby, as well as Damo Lily from our Socialist Telly team. And Glynis made a big splash on Sunday morning on Crispin Flintoff's Not the Andrew Marr programme, and he talked about the legal aspects of the massive Labour data breach. And she's kindly agreed to come on the show to talk about that in more detail and with some new information that's come in since Sunday. And Lily Boulby is an NEC in the Unison union, the UK's biggest union and one of Labour's biggest affiliates, who has been summarily kicked out of the Labour Party in what appears to be a move by the right-wing regime within the party to remove the left's elected majority on the Labour Link committee that deals with the liaison between the party and the union. So welcome. Thank you for coming on the programme. Feel free to jump in at any time with any points you want to make. But obviously, I think we'll start with Glynis, if that's okay. And Glynis, I wonder if you can give us... before we jump into the data breach stuff, you won a case against Labour.
I did.
As I understand it. So give us a bit of background about that, and then people will have a bit better understanding.
Okay, well, it was a few years ago. I think it was probably about 2016, and I joined the Labour Party originally because of Jeremy Corbyn as a registered supporter, and then upgraded to a full member. And not long after that, of course, there was the second leadership election. Of course, a lot of people who were registered supporters had to then pay another £25 on top to be able to vote if they'd become registered supporters before a certain date. And there was a group of us, I think it was on Twitter, who just were incensed by that. We thought it was like a tax on voting, and we didn't really care who you voted for. We just thought you should have the chance to vote. Anyway, long story short, what we said to these people who were affected by this is, look, you pay your £25 to vote, and if you've utilised that money from your best fare to work or your food bill for that week or the coat you're going to buy for your kid, we'll gift you £25 for your kid's coat, your food bill, your best fare for the week. Anyway, Sam Matthews and co. Got hold of this and told us we had to take the crowdfund page down because we raised like 14 grand in 24, 48 hours or something ridiculous. I mean, we raised a lot of money. People obviously felt quite strongly about it. And so anyway, took the page down. Obviously, the pledges went back to people. And Sam Matthews assured the person who'd set up the page that no further action would be taken. And then next thing you know, we were all suspended for breaching the rules on recruitment. And they tried to say that we bought votes, I think was what they were saying. So I was mad about that, and so I took them to court basically for breach of contract, for failing to supply me with what it was exactly that I was supposed to have done. The usual stuff. They haven't moved on from that at all, where you're not told exactly what it is you're supposed to have done wrong. And so what happened then is about 3 days before the hearing, I put in a witness statement, and I had a phone call off Mr. McNichols, God rest his soul. I had a phone call off his solicitor, and I always remember it was a Saturday. It was about 2:00. The Wales against Scotland rugby match was due at 2:30, so I didn't really want to be speaking to anybody on the phone because I wanted to watch the rugby. So McNichols' solicitor said that his client wanted to mediate because he was worried about costs. I said, oh, is he? I said, because he wasn't worried about costs when I suggested mediation. He wasn't at all interested. And the solicitor said, oh, well, the thing is, they're going to unsuspend you. I said, that's you saying that. I've got nothing in black and white. And he said, oh, I can get them to do all that now if you withdraw your claim. No, I said, I'm not. I said, I want something in black and white, and I want confirmation that there won't be a warning being held on file. Anyway, bearing in mind this is a Saturday, 2:02. The Labour HQ then emailed me all in black and white to say you're unsuspended. There'll be no warning held on file. And then we decided then at that point, that we both of us withdraw the the court hearing. But because they were the defendants and because they kept it going, they actually did get charged money for that, because of course I'd rung the court on the Monday and I said, look, I know they're saying that this is going to be withdrawn, but I just want to check. And the clerk said, no, you're fine. He said, it's all been done. He said, I'll email you and obviously the other side to let you know. And it was him that said, oh, this is going to cost them. Because, of course, every time you put an application in to the county court, it costs you money. So it did probably cost them about 150 quid probably just to put that application in. Oh, boo-hoo, isn't it? But I mean, all that annoyed me was the fact that it probably came out of members' subs was the bit that sort of stuck in my craw. So, yeah. And I think since then, I think they've been a bit afraid of me because they never really bothered me after that. I don't know why.
But it doesn't seem to have stopped them from employing the same tactics against others. So,
absolutely.
Which kind of leads us on, because it connects in as well in a way to the data breach. Now, first thing I want to ask, on Sunday, you said that the Labour Party has a cavalier attitude to members' data. Now, I would certainly agree with that, but I wanted to get a bit more information as to what you meant exactly by that, and what have you seen that has led you to that conclusion?
Well, I think, Steve, as some people will know, I helped quite a few people that have been suspended from the Labour Party or are under investigation. And of course, the one thing I used to say, and other people who were obviously assisting me as well, the one thing we did was say to everybody who was under investigation, put in a subject access request. Let the dog see the rabbit. Let's see what they've got on you. So we were getting these subject access requests in, and there were two things really. The one is horrendous. The other one is a more common occurrence, I think. So the one chap had put in a subject access request, and it came through, and he sent me the copy, and he rang me before, and he said, I'm sending this to you. Glynis, he said, you won't believe what's in there. He said, there are 4 other people's details in this subject access request as well as mine. Now, this gentleman didn't have a common name, but he didn't have a sort of very unusual name either. So there were 4 other people with the same or similar name to him in this subject access request. So the one wasn't even a Labour Party member. He was a donor. His bank details were in there, all that. But the other thing that I saw, I just, well, it doesn't happen very often, but I was gobsmacked because there was this document and it said Operation Watched, and then it had the nickname of a football club. And this document was about a Sky Sports journalist with a similar sounding name to the person who'd put in the SAR. And they had him, the Labour Party had him under surveillance. I have no idea what for. It was the most bizarre thing. So I contacted the Labour Party, the data controller, by email, and I said, this is a breach. You need to self-report to the Information Commissioner's office within 72 hours, and you need to tell these people that their data's been breached. Of course, as usual, no answer was the stern reply. So Jenny Formby was GS then, and I emailed her, and she said, oh, I'll check, I'll come back to you, which she did. And she said, oh, I've spoken to the data people and they've said it's all right, it's not severe, so they won't be doing anything about it. I said, okay, well, just so you know, I am going to contact these people because obviously I've got the details. I said, and I'm going to get in touch with the ICO as well, which I did. And the ICO just did nothing. And I often think the ICO were a little bit to blame with this data breach, because if they'd been more robust, did enforcement action with all these complaints that were going in over the last 5 to 6 years, we might not be where we are with this data breach now. I sort of believe that. Now, the other example I wanted to give was a chap who was standing for councillor, Labour councillor, and an opposing councillor had put in a complaint about it, but it was a bit of a vendetta going on, I think is fair to say. And when his SAR came back, there were a series of emails between Labour HQ and Regional Labour. Will we suspend him? Won't we suspend him? That sort of thing. And then out of the blue, another email came in from a journalist in a local newspaper saying, "Oh, are you going to suspend this person?" So Labour HQ said, "Yeah, we probably will, but we haven't told him yet." So this was at 09:45 in the morning. The gentleman who was standing as the Labour councillor wasn't informed of his suspension until 2 o'clock that afternoon. But of course, in the meantime, the journalist telephoned him and said, "Oh, hi, I'm whoever from this newspaper, and we're going to do an article. Understand you've been suspended. Just wanted to have your comments." And he knew nothing about it at that stage, obviously, because he hadn't been informed. And that happens a lot. We know that that's happened with Jeremy Corbyn, for example, where it was a photographer, I believe, that told him that he was going to be suspended. And so they've just really got this absolutely lackadaisical, I mean, that's the mildest form of it, to sort of gross incompetence. I mean, are they doing it?
Well, it does seem that the more right wing the publication, the more likely it is that they'll get a leak from the Labour Party about somebody getting suspended.
Yeah, exactly.
As we've seen on a number of occasions with various people.
And it's awful, isn't it?
It is. I mean, the other thing that seems to really kind of grate on this whole situation is the fact that, as with the disciplinaries, the Labour Party demands silence of those who are affected, and but reserves the right to blab as much as it wants to the media and everybody else about it. And they've done similar to this in the case of this leak, because David Evans wrote out telling everybody not to talk about what had happened, including to victims of the breach.
And of course, the thing is, Steve, the Diana Neslin and others versus David Evans, that went to court. The judge actually said in that, and the Labour Party confirmed for the court, that the confidentiality request was just that, a request. You can talk about it all you like. Really, they hold no sway in that regard. So,
But then Crispin, who was running the show that you were on Sunday, he's been suspended. And after he publicly tweeted about his suspension, they then added further disciplinary charges against him for mentioning his suspension, which is just, I'm allowed to talk about it to the Samaritans, and that's about it.
I told him, I said, "You can tell me, Crispin, I'm a good Samaritan." So, Labour have got a cavalier attitude to data protection and data retention. Of that, I think that's a truth universally known. To quote a famous quote. And I've given you the two examples, and I know that some people are on about taking legal action, and that there's a place for that. There's no doubt, and that may well end up being the sort of go-to thing that needs to be done. But I think we're a way off that at the minute. There is a Facebook group that's been set up by James Hall and Tony Greenstein, Labour Data Breach Victims Group. It's a private group at the minute because, funnily enough, what was happening, law firms were logging on and going on the page and advertising their wares, and it's just, I mean, these no-win, no-fee lawyers, there's an awful lot of them, and you can't always sort the wheat out from the chaff, unfortunately. So what has been suggested is that the opinion of a specialist data protection barrister will be obtained. So you get like counsel's opinion. And that's a good way to go, I think, because it'll give the definitive answer around, a risk assessment in terms of prospect of success and what, if anything else, needs to be done. Because it's no good throwing good money after bad. It's no good going to these no-win, no-fee lawyers and paying money or having to take out insurance or whatever, and then not realizing that there's stuff that needs to be done, and it could push up the cost. So I think they want to get this expert opinion and then basically see what that says and take it from there. So there's a lot of things sort of going on at the moment, and we know that the Labour Party is reluctant, if I can put it like that, to tell people exactly what data has been compromised. Is it their bank details? Is it their telephone numbers? Is it their name, address, date of birth, or whatever it is? They're not giving this information out at all. The Labour party privacy policy that's on their website, it's of interest to note that 5 times in the last year that has altered. So, they're expecting people to go on the website and check for any changes. Well, people, they don't have time to do that, do they? They don't have time to go on and check in case. If they're going to make these changes, they should tell the members that they're making these changes and not expect them to stumble across them, quite frankly. So National Crime Agency and the National Cyber Security Centre, as well as the Information Commissioner's Office, are also involved. And I think that is probably because of the reach. I think there could be a significant number of people involved here. When this first happened, I did a little poll on Twitter, and to try and sort of get some toe in the water sort of temperature check as to who was affected. Obviously, a lot of my followers on Twitter are ex-members, so there was a higher proportion of those showing on the poll, obviously. But there were donors, and there were also people who were in unions like the one Lily is in, Unison, Unite, those unions who are affiliated to Labour. They were also affected as well. So I think this is quite far-reaching. There's also some talk that it could even be, voters, people whose opinions were canvassed on the doorstep, that it could be their information as well. So I think it could be quite a significant reach. And obviously, I suppose those two organisations, the National Crime Agency, National Cyber Security Centre, I suppose they're looking at it as well. Somebody mentioned it to me earlier on from a sort of national security stance, because of the fact that it's a political party that's been affected. And I suppose, there could be national security if that was reflected across the governing political party. So that's understandable, I suppose.
I did hear one report of, we heard lots of reports of people who've, long left the party and been included in this breach anyway.
Yeah.
But I did hear one report from someone who said that they'd left the party in protest at the Labour's treatment of Michael Foot back in the
that was a while ago,
and yet had still received an email saying that they've been affected by this breach. I mean, how long is the party entitled to keep this information? And also, if I can ask, and you can deal with both as it pleases you, but what is the party's legal obligation in terms of how it discloses information to people who are affected? Because you've mentioned that they haven't said what's been lost, and they haven't said who's lost it. Do they have a legal duty to give people that information?
Well, an individual has a right to know what has happened with their data, around like what the party are doing with it, how long it's going to be retained for, like perfect example there with the you mentioned Michael Foot, and obviously that was an awfully long time ago. What on earth are they doing contacting people? Why are they keeping information that long? I mean, there's different lengths of time that information is kept, but the main thing is, the Labour Party, any organisation, have to objectively justify the retention of it. So they have to objectively justify. And of course, a lot of people have exercised their right of erasure. They've written to the party, they've said, I want my details expunged. And Labour have written back and gone, yeah, okay, no problem. And they've been affected. So clearly, Labour are not taking any notice. And that's what I said, I think the Information Commissioner's Office, if they're not doing anything about this, then I just don't know what to say about that, really. Now, I mentioned to you, Steve, about a few little bits of information that have come in. And one interesting thing, I'm going to say my Labour Party source brought to my attention that there is an ICO manager who was, I'm not sure if he actually is now, who was in charge of political party complaints, and he is a Labour councillor. And his name is Alex Ganatis, and he was leader of Stockport Council. And in May 2021, Andy Burnham appointed him as his sort of environmental czar, I think it was. And he still works for the ICO. So can you see what there could be a conflict of interest there? Some unconscious bias, or conscious bias, I should say, where if he is in charge of dealing with freedom of information requests about political party, and he's a Labour councillor, and clearly a more centrist Labour councillor, if I can put it like that, then what's that all about? So, you know, and if we're looking at sort of influence exerted around the decision making that is required on these cases, then, you know, that's quite a big concern. I was quite surprised when I got that information. I mean, it is on the internet. There's a chap called Tim Turner. He's quite a challenging individual, but he's very knowledgeable about data protection issues, and his blog is called 2040. So if you Google that and go in, there's a thing called, I think the name of the article is called Caesar's Wife or something like that. And if you Google 2040, you should be able to find mentions about this, because somebody actually put in a freedom of information request to the ICO to get that information. So that's quite concerning. And it just, like I said, the ICO really, you know, I think they got a few questions to answer. Sorry, Lily.
I was just going to say, anecdotally, in terms of how they've handled my data, I was informed of my case, my auto-expulsion case, on the 22nd of October. The data breach then happened in between that date and then when I've now been auto-expelled. And I'm still getting emails from the Labour Party, even though they've kicked me out. I'm still getting multiple emails about my BLP, my CLP. I've got an email from here at 10 to 6 today saying, do you want to work for the Labour Party? We have 2 local organiser posts. They managed to let Labour Link know within 24 hours that I wasn't a member of the Labour Party anymore. So there's
funny that, isn't it? Yeah,
I got details of my this month's CLP meeting sent through to me this week, and I left the party last month. Evans playing fast and loose, playing cavalier with the data and everything else. This third party, though, I mean, I believe I've read on the internet that they have got to justify passing it on to a third party.
Of course they have. They've got to objectively justify everything, Daniel.
Data then.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Whether you're a member or an ex-member or expelled or suspended, this third party, this mystery entity has got our data. Yeah. Why?
I mean, it's not unusual.
Sorry, I'll just jump in on that, because that was my question, because I've had a couple of people say to me, you know, because obviously it says in the thing, we will never pass your information to a third party. It would seem, logically speaking, that giving it to an outside company is giving it to a third party. But some people say, no, that as a data processor for the person responsible for the data, that doesn't really count as a third party. So, you know, can you give us any clarification on that one?
Well, that's not really my area of expertise, the sort of ICO data protection bit. But what I will say is, on this privacy policy on their website, what I noticed, I actually gritted my teeth and read it from start to finish. There's about 8 pages. But in there, they mention BTOSIS, which is the modern day directory inquiries. Experian is mentioned. I'll come back to them in a sec. And what's the other one? The electoral register. So these are third parties, but they could be, you know, legitimate third parties where the Labour Party is maybe checking some information if they were phone banking or whatever and were checking telephone numbers. So yeah, that's okay. But Experian, I actually emailed the CEO of Experian, who's called Brian Cassin, and he did reply, and he said that they weren't the ones involved in the data breach, and that they don't buy any data from Labour or anything like that. Nothing has been sold to them. So, you know, it's just trying to find out who this third party is. And in any event, Labour are the data controller. They control the data. If they give it to somebody else to process, then obviously they still retain some responsibility for that. So if they think, they can absolve themselves, I think they might be mistaken there. And the thing is, until the full facts come out, this is what's going to happen. nature abhors a vacuum, and you were going to get people, because of the lack of information, coming up with all sorts of theories. I think the one was that it was the campaign company, which is David Evans' limited company, that he was a director of. He stepped down, obviously, to take up the role of General Secretary, but his wife, Aileen Evans, is a 75% shareholder in that company. All this information is freely available in the public domain on Companies House. So she is certainly a person with significant control within that company. And some of you may remember that David Evans, the campaign company, posted up a tweet saying that they weren't the third party involved, and they took these allegations very seriously, and if they continued, they might have to take action. Ooh, we're all shaking in our boots. And somebody on Twitter pointed out that it sounded suspiciously like Dave thug speak, and I don't disagree.
Well,
so
sounded suspiciously like what? Say again.
It sounds suspiciously like Dave thug speak. You know, thug.
It does sound like a Labour Party letter or ones that we've seen over the last few months.
Yeah,
saying,
exactly.
Do not do that.
Exactly.
It's Dave Evans' diktat.
Yeah, exactly. Dictatorial Dave.
That's the one. The Experian thing I've seen come up before, and I thought to myself, well, hang on, they're a credit reference agency. I could kind of understand them having connections with the electoral register, for example, because being on the electoral roll does impact on your credit rating.
Of course it does, yeah.
Bizarrely. I always thought it was an odd one. But it's only Experian we're talking about. They're not the only credit reference agency out there. So it's a little bit weird it's them and not Equifax as well, for example.
But because that was the only ones I could find, because I was looking for mentions of a third party of some description, and those were the three that I found. Experian, BTOSIS, and obviously the electoral register. I mean, I can read you out the email I had off this fella. I mean, it's quite bland, really, but see if I can find it. I should have got this up ready, shouldn't I? Here we are. So he said, "Dear Miss Millward, thank you for your email dated 5th of November. We are aware of a reported data security incident relating to the Labour Party's database. To be clear, we are not the third party referenced in the party statement, and no Experian systems have been compromised. And I can confirm, in answer to your question, Experian has not been sold any data by the Labour Party." So fair play, he's come back and given that information. But, I think there are others, and we're just not being told who they are and why. Why are we not being told? I don't understand it. I mean, we're getting on for 3 weeks now. I mean, that data breach, as far as we're aware, according to the Labour Party, took place on or around the 29th of October. That's when they were notified of it. Obviously, they got 72 hours then to report the breach to the ICO, and you can be sure with the Labour Party, they waited right to the last minute of that deadline before doing that. Then obviously ICO probably needed a couple of days. There might have been a bit of back and forth, and that's probably why people didn't start to get informed until about the 3rd of November. But since that initial email, and I think there was one the following week, there's been nothing. There's been no updates on the website, nothing at all. And it's just appalling, because on Chris Spin's show, not last week, the week before, there was a lady on there who'd been the victim of domestic abuse. And she did not use her real name in the public domain. She had a pseudonym. But the Labour Party had her real name, obviously, because they had to have that to match up other records. And she is worried sick that this information will leak out into the public domain and will have real implications for her, So there's people are really quite anxious about it. And I think, you'd have to have a heart like a swinging brick not to sort of realise that people are very distressed about this. And I mean, I've noticed a bit of flurry of activity in my emails, spam, scam, spoof emails coming through. Obviously, I like to think I'm sort of all about, and I do check these things. I don't go clicking on any links. I think, well, I don't recognize that, and I'll hover my mouse over the from, and it comes up with some ridiculous name about a foot long that you've never heard of before. So obviously I just block the domain, block the sender, and in the spam it goes, and eventually gets deleted. But if somebody is elderly or suffers with learning difficulties, and there are people like that in the party, and they click on those, and open the links or what have you. That's what I said, it's not on. It really isn't. It makes me so mad. It really does. I mean, I think as well, in terms of the legal position, obviously with Labour, the difficulty is if people were thinking of taking legal action against them because of this, and as I said, it's up to you. I mean, my advice is free. You don't have to listen to me. I'm not the font of all knowledge, that's for sure. But all I would say is I feel it's important. Thank you, Damo. I think it's important to just wait and see, get some more information around the legal position, because the Labour Party is an unincorporated association, so its members are the party. So obviously the General Secretary is elected. Was he elected? I don't know. Anyway, the General Secretary is supposed to be elected by the members to represent the members' interests. So when you sue the Labour Party, you sue the General Secretary and all its members, except for you, because you cannot sue yourself. So it's not like a limited company where the limited company is a separate legal identity from the director of that company. An unincorporated association is obviously slightly different in a legal sense. And as I said, you've got to look at the framework, the legal framework. You've got to look at whether this is a tort, which is a legal term for wrongdoing, whether it's contract law. So you have to look at what area you're in. Obviously, as I see it, there are two limbs here, really. You've got the wrongdoing, clearly, because of the data breach, and then you've also got the breach of contract because of the sharing of information with a third party that the members don't appear to have been told about or given their consent to. So that's a breach of contract. So I think, you've got to look at that and decide what applies, really. But like I said, it's open. We could be talking identity theft or fraud, financial loss, unauthorised reversal of pseudo-anonymisation, that poor lady I just mentioned, and loss of confidential personal data protected by professional secrecy. So some government departments don't say you cannot be a member of a Labour Party. They don't want you to take an active role. So you couldn't be, branch secretary or chair, but you can be a member of the party, but they don't want you to broadcast it. And if that information got out and got back to that person's employer, they could lose their job. So you just got to look at this and think of the effects that there could be as a result, of the Labour Party not, as I see it, taking appropriate technical and organisational measures to protect personal data, that they've been interested with. And clearly, have not shown themselves to be up to the job. So I think my advice to people was get your subject access requests in, but be specific. And I think, some people are saying, oh, well, the Labour Party will be inundated with subject access requests. Oh, who cares? Who cares? They've put people in this situation. So put your subject access request in and ask them what personal data of mine has been affected, because you want to know if it's your bank account details or something of that nature. Who is the third party? They probably won't tell you. What are the contact details of the third party? Again, they probably won't tell you. And why did you give them the data? What was the purpose? Because that's the information that you need. If you do go down a legal route, you're going to need this information at some point. And obviously, if they don't come back within the 30 days, once you put your subject access request in, complain to the ICO. And if the ICO get inundated, tough. Who cares? These organisations, that's what they're there for. That is their job. If they haven't got sufficient people to deal with it, then pull in some resources from elsewhere in the department, like everybody else does. So I just think all this whining about, how difficult it is for them, I couldn't care less. Obviously, report suspicious emails, texts, or messages to Action Fraud. And if you see any funny, suspicious activity on your bank or credit card, report it to the bank. They've all got fraud departments. Report it to them. I also suggested as well people, particularly elderly people who tend to use landlines quite a lot. I mean, and obviously this activity can take place on mobile phones anyway, but register with a telephone preference service. You can Google that and get the details. And what that does, it puts your name on a list. So if you get somebody trying to ring you, they are supposed to check this list before they do, if it's like marketing calls and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of these scammers will try and do jigsaw information. So they'll get a bit of information here, a bit of information there, and then put it together to make up a picture. So they may ring up and pretend to be from the bank and ask you for your details. And, we all, I'm sure, would be like, yeah, whatever, love. But, like I said, somebody who's elderly, vulnerable, has learning difficulties, they may give this information over. And these scammers are very clever. They're very clever. They're very manipulative. They know all the right questions to ask and lull people into a false sense of security. So,
if I could
sorry, Lily.
If I could just come in on that quickly, just two things. First of all, when you mentioned the relation it has to labelling, that is a really good point, because Unison don't know either. We were in Development and Organisation Committee today, which is the sort of organising the internal union, and that relies, that data comes under that, and an NEC member did question that, and the Labour Party haven't let us know either, haven't let Unison know.
See, that's wrong. I mean, a lot of those unions were affiliated to Labour, and Labour get money from them. I got to be funny. Where are the shop stewards of those unions? You got Unite, Unison, GMB, ASLEF, the Munitions Union, TSSA, which is the Trade and Salaried something or another. There's a lot of these unions. What they should be pressing Labour for this information as well. And my dear old dad, God rest his soul, he always used to say that to me. Glynis, the squeakiest cogs get the most oil. And if anybody is under the impression that if they sit there quietly and smile sweetly, Labour is going to give them all this information, I think they're tripping, quite frankly, because they're not. And I think, we just really got to be shouting about this. I put a freedom of information request into the ICO. And a lot of people have been like, oh, they're never going to answer that. But I look at it like this. If you don't ask, you do not get. So I've said to the ICO, you've been notified of the breach. You're obviously involved in it. So I want to know what type of data has been breached. Why was it given to the third party? What's the third party's name? What are their contact details? Now, the chances are they're not going to answer any of those questions. The other thing I asked them was how many people are involved. Because if they could answer that, and it proves my theory that this is a significant breach and there's a big amount of people that have been involved. If you've got that sort of information and you start saying to people in the media, look at this, these people aren't even Labour Party members and they're affected, because there's no doubt in my mind, this is not ex-members, or current members, or a couple of old trots or whatever that nobody cares about. You know what I mean? I think this goes a lot further, and I think this is why they're trying to keep it under wraps, because I think they might be panicking a bit.
I think you're right. I mean, I've received the email. I've had it twice. I've had it via the email that I used whilst I was a Labour member, and I've received it via the email that I use with Unite. So presumably they've lost either two lots of data or lost my data twice. We don't know. It's been handed to a third party twice. What advice would you give to trade union members right now to put some pressure on their unions to actually put their heads above the parapet on this?
I mean, in all honesty, Damien, I think I'd be inclined to say to my, my shop steward or whoever is the person, the go-to person in your union, look, if you do not put some pressure on Labour to sort this out, I'm going to sort of say to people, don't pay the proportion of your subs that goes to the Labour Party, because why should we pay them when they're doing this with our data? And I think you just got to, do it like that. Just call a meeting, say to the, I don't know, do they still call, I say shop stewards, but I do speak 1950s sometime. I don't know, have they got different names?
Stewards or reps, it's
reps, there we are. Shop steward, I like that. It's comforting for me. It's very 70s. So,
thank you. Thank you, Glynis. I think we better, because the time's ticking on. We better bring Lily in. I don't want to bring her on the show for nothing. And obviously, you're very welcome to have your say on what comes next as well. But Lily, you were elected recently to serve the members of the Unison Union on the Labour Link Committee, which is the interface between the union and the Labour Party, as I understand it, and then promptly expelled by the party, eliminating the left's majority of one on the Labour Link Committee, coincidentally. Give us a bit about the background of that, about your suspension or expulsion, rather, and what the ramifications of that are on how things work within the union as well.
Absolutely. So my auto expulsion is based on my support for socialist appeal as a tendency within the Labour Party. Some of the counts that I was given as, the evidence against me was, I've got them here, 2 counts of sharing posts on Facebook this year and then in November 2020. 1 count in February 2021 of Socialist Appeal's Facebook page sharing a video of me speaking at a public event. 1 count of being mentioned by name in a tweet from Sheffield Marxist Society. And what was the last one? 2 counts of using photo frames made by Socialist Appeal on my Facebook account. 1 from June 2020 and 1 from April 2020. One of which said, "Fight racism, fight capitalism." So I don't know why the Labour Party are trying to kick me out for supporting that sort of message.
Do you know what? That's blown my mind, that has. That's blown my mind.
And it's the same for an awful lot of people. And what I was going to say, Glynis, before when you were talking about the question of what this data has actually done, like what data has actually disappeared, is I saw on Labour's Twitter today, with this whole thing about MPs' second jobs. There was a video. What did they say? It was basically Keir Starmer talking about banning second jobs for MPs. And the video was titled, "Labour would clean up Westminster and restore trust in politics," which is an absolute joke for them to say that at the minute when they've got a data breach that they won't tell anyone
there goes another
anything about. Exactly. And then also you've got the auto expulsions as well. You heard stories of not stories, they were true, in Labour Party conference of delegates, CLPs, not being able to have their motions heard because all of their delegates had been pulled off the floor or expelled or stopped from coming to conference. I had a good friend of mine. It is. I had a good friend of mine literally pulled off the conference floor for wearing a T-shirt that said "Starmer out," which by extension meant that his co-delegate that he was with was put in a horrible position because she was disabled and he had her medication and he couldn't get back in touch with her. So it is absolutely it's horrific. It's anyway, and the thing with all of these is the fact that with all of these things, these charges against me, they're all retrospective. They're all before the NEC decided to expel, to have Socialist Appeal, as a prescribed organisation.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We had one of the right-wing MPs, Chris Bryant, was on the TV the other week when all this stuff with the Tory former MP Owen Paterson was kicking off, and the Tories were trying to change the rules after the fact in order to get him off the hook. And Bryant went on without a trace of irony and told viewers of whichever television program it was he was on that was completely wrong to the idea of changing the rules retrospectively and applying them back over to something that's already happened. And there you are with the Labour front bench doing exactly that. The thing that jumps out at me, did I mishear you? One of the things that they were listing as evidence against you was that somebody else mentioned you.
Yes, a Twitter account mentioned me. And not even by my handle, by my name, just by writing Lily. Said, "Great to see Lily standing for the NEC," which was Sheffield Marxist Society, which is affiliated to the Marxist Student Federation, which organises with Socialist Appeal. It's a lot of young members, a lot of students, obviously. I've been... when I was a student, I was in Sheffield Marxist Society for the whole time I was at university, 5 years, and they referred to me as R. Lily, which I was the chair of Sheffield Marxist Society at one point in time. So of course they would refer to me by that. But yeah, just R. Lily was what. So
somebody would voiced support for you, and they've used that to say you breached the rule of supporting another organisation.
It's just crazy, isn't it?
People talk about you when you're standing for an election.
Absolutely.
Well,
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? This question of trust. This, Labour Party will make the Labour Party will restore trust in politics, and it's like, well, trust for who? Because then I can't trust you with my data.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm now not a party member. You don't trust me as a voter and as a member. So who is the trust really for? It's kicking out socialists. It's kicking out anything to do with Corbyn whatsoever, and it's putting the trust of big business and the ruling class back into the Labour Party, so it can be a safe pair of hands for the ruling class, to make sure that when the Tories mess up too much, we can get Labour.
That's right. Just change the colour of the rosette, isn't it?
Exactly.
That's all it is.
That's what it was with Blairism. So no change.
In your case, it seems to be very much keeping Unison a right-wing union, especially when you look at not only what's happened to you, but what's going on with Paul Holmes as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's give people who might not be aware a bit of context on that, because over the last few months, I mean, Paul Holmes became very close to winning the General Secretary election last year. Would have done if certain, left groups had listened to what they were being told about the popularity of Holmes versus their preferred candidate, and they'd pulled out of the race to unify the left vote. We would have seen a left leader of the union now. That would have been an interesting situation. But Paul then got elected as the president of the union. The union then immediately suspended him. There are rumours, which I'll break on this programme, actually, that Holmes has won his case against Kirklees Council, which is, which has been apparently and certainly allegedly working hand in glove with the union right to nobble Holmes and try and take him out of the picture so that they can get rid of him and try and weaken the left. The left's then won a majority on the National Executive Committee, and then gone on to win a majority on the Labour Link Committee, having seen the union's delegates last month go against September, not last month, go against the union's official policies, conference policies, etc., to vote in David Evans and to disenfranchise Labour members by making it harder for anybody to mount a challenge to the leadership. So, I mean, it's been a dog's breakfast across a period of months, but also as a big resurgence by the left within the union. So, can you give us any information about how that was achieved? We'll come on that next. But first off, I mean, what's the impact of them expelling you from the Labour Party in direct terms within Unison?
I mean, it does create a very very thin majority on Labour Link. I'm out of the loop now. I'm not allowed to know these things anymore. But I think that it may be a break between left and right candidates. I think it might be a clean break between either side of them, and obviously the right wing of the union having the power in the situation that's just gone past, with obviously the chair, the outgoing chair, not being time for real change, shall we say, is kind of has ensured that this new left that that has come up and that I'm a part of, and that is kind of taken over the NEC of Unison, doesn't have the same the same majority on Labour Link because of the nature of it, because Paul being suspended and myself being kicked off. And I mean, I don't want to accuse or say anything libellous, but or whatever the word is, but it is hard to feel like it's not a personal attack, because it's not about me personally. So it's not an attack on me specifically because I'm me. I would hope not, at least. But it is interesting that they want to get rid of a young member, a woman in a majority of in the union that supposedly supports women. But yeah, and it's majority women. But yeah, it's not about me specifically. It's more targeting. It does kind of feel like it is targeted, because my husband, we have the same initials, we have the same surname, we have the same address, we're in the same CLP, BLP. He's not had a single thing. I actually met him through politics at Sheffield University, so he was in Sheffield Marxist Society as well. And so I have absolutely no doubt, when they were searching for me to send me that letter, his details probably came up as well, and I've probably got him excluded now talking about this. So if he watches this, apologies. Sorry, Luke. But yeah, you know, it's hard to see when these disparities, and with what I was saying before about Labour Link being informed within 24 hours, but me still being on general Labour lists, it's hard not to see this as some sort of targeted attack, or at least, you know, a desire to keep Unison's Labour Link in the right wing, because
it's a well-known tactic by the Labour right, as Glynis mentioned. I think
Absolutely.
it was about, you know, prior to conference, or was it you, Lily? I can't remember.
Lily.
That you know, they were suspending and expelling left-wing delegates left, right, and centre in order to you know, try and protect David Evans and get their rigging of the voting system through.
And I think as well, you know, I mean, I know Lily said there that she didn't take it personally, and I think you're right, Lily. I don't think they go, oh, that's Lily Boulby, you know, we're gonna do this to her. I don't think they do that. It's just the position you hold, the influence you've got. They want to try and remove that. It's just, you're just like a number on paper to them. You know what I mean? It's like a strategy. But the thing is, when they are, you know, sending out these letters, which are appalling, really, about people who are under investigation. There's all this reams and reams of clause this and clause that, and, you know, go to your doctor or speak to the Samaritans if you feel depressed. And I think, you know, there are some people who do feel very upset by the tone of the letters that they get, you know, but they don't care. They just do not care. They don't, you know, they've got no conception, I think, of the effect that their words and their actions have on people. You know, and it's all right if you're a hard-nosed old bag like me, but I mean, that not everybody is like that, are they?
We just had a comment in there, which is, you know, it's as though the phrase Kafkaesque was created to describe what has become of the Labour Party. But I tell you what, if Kafka wrote a play with this plotline, people would have laughed at him because they would have said it was too far-fetched, you know. Yeah,
exactly. No, that's a good point.
Just to come on that question that was on the most recent comment, why are members paying subs to inept unions? I think that's, you know, that is a question that people have asked about the Labour Party as well. Why are people paying subs into it? And particularly with the unions, I would say, you know, if everybody Time for Real Change supporters had left Unison, then we wouldn't be able to have a left-wing NEC now, and the same thing with Graham being elected in Unite, and you know how much she champions the reps and the workplace and pushing that forward. So that's why I think it is, you know, without sounding like a broken record of saying stay and fight. Obviously, the situations change, events change, but in a union where, you know, you're fighting in your workplace and you've got the ability to strike and take away your labour and really stick it to the employer and to the government and link up with fellow workers. I think it is very important there to, you know, keep the fight up and keep pushing.
Yeah. And I think it might have been Paul Meany who posted up a comment and said about, you know, maybe getting legal advice from the unions, because of course, yeah, a lot of them have got, you know, a legal sort of branch or whatever that they can outsource to. You know, I think, like, I'm in PCS and I know we've got links to a local sort of lawyers network, so you can ring them up about stuff that's not to do with work. You know, you can ring them up to stuff to do with any sort of legal issue that comes up. So I think, like, it could be an idea for union members, particularly those affiliated to Labour who were affected by this, to maybe get in touch and speak to these lawyers. I mean, they are not specialist data protection lawyers, I doubt very much, but I know the one time I rang up, the person that I spoke to, I think it was Thompson Solicitors? I can't remember which one it was that PCS used then. But she didn't know the answer, but she said, don't worry, I'll find out and I'll get back to you, or somebody who does. And she came back and gave me all these details that obviously a colleague of hers somewhere else knew about. So I think that that's certainly a good thing to consider for union members affiliated to Labour who've been affected by this data breach, to sort of maybe have a word with your what are they called again? Union rep, shop steward, to you know, get you some help there maybe.
Mm-hmm. And if I could just come back on the further thing to what I was just saying, then this question of inept unions. If you're in Unison and you're unhappy with the way that Unison has been acting recently, then absolutely get involved. I mean, there is absolutely no question that Unison is in a war right now. Unison is in it's a battleground between I would say us, who want us being time for real change, and people who want to change the union, who want to make it member-led, who want to make sure that workers' voices are being heard and that we are being, protected by our own union, and also in the workplace as well, and we are actually reaching out to wider issues in society as well, not particularly sticking to workplace issues. So if you're in Unison, then get involved with Time for Real Change. We're in the process of planning an all reps meeting because we want to get everyone excited, involved. We want to talk about which way the union's going, because that is what we feel is central to the union, is democracy, and is having members say and having elected officials do what they were elected to do, and not doing it for their own interests. Exactly.
Well, that was going to be my question for the last 5 minutes. I mean, what can, we've seen this left resurgence, probably too long a story to say how that was achieved, but it's under attack. I mean, how can Unison members and other people of goodwill defend it? But more importantly, how can they extend it as well? Because, it needs to be on the offensive against these right-wingers, not just trying to fend off their various and, dubious attacks.
Absolutely. Join the fight. I mean, that's the fundamental thing of it. Join the fight, get involved. We don't, we wouldn't have changed anything if we hadn't organised and got together and wanted to stand for these NEC seats. I mean, to take an example of the youth stuff that's going on in Unison right now. I think the last time I was here, I was still in the process of the election. So I said, Unison only has 63,000 young members, but I've seen the figures of recruitment now, and we got up to almost 70,000 in the pandemic. And then we lost them all again afterwards from young members. And obviously people age out. We're back down to pre-pandemic levels now. And obviously people age out, over 27, whatever, but that does not account for that huge loss. And there's a question there of what didn't we offer to those young members that made them join in the pandemic when they needed our support and help and protection the most? And then what made them leave? So it's a question of getting young members active and getting them involved, and we are having and just making sure that they know that their voice is heard, and it's not just £7 you send away a month and you don't hear anything about, and God knows what's going on, you've never met another young person in the Unison because there's not one in your branch, whatever. The Young Members Conference is coming up in December, and I really hope that it's going to be Unison's first ever youth conference. So
I thought that was your tap again, Lily.
No, it's not the tap this time. No, I've survived without that going off. But yeah, I'm making sure that I was disappointed to see that more motions were ruled out by the Standing Orders Committee than ruled in for Unison's first ever youth conference, which I think is a shame. If we're telling people that, this is your first ever conference, we can get people organised, we can, you can have your say, but then these motions aren't put on the table. So I think,
And who made that decision? I mean, that might as well be
a Standing Orders Committee. I'm not sure what that makes up of, but it brings another question into the fact that I think it brings another question in, is that Unison needs more support and more resources behind their youth work. There's hardly any support for young members, and it's maybe it's a lack of priority for young members, but young members do need to be the priority. So that's something that I really want to push over my sort of position, is the fact that we need to get young members as a priority in the union, and we need to make sure that there are resources and that we've got staff that can take on that sort of stuff. And, young members are seen not as just a part of the equalities unit and just a part of self-organised groups, because they are different. It's not the same as, Women's Committee, Disabled Members Committee. It is different because you're in there because of your age and you age out, and whether or not we retain members is a question of can we provide a fighting member-led union and a democratic and transparent union for those young members in the first place? So, that's a call to young members specifically, because it's us that are going to be, carrying on the future of the union. So it's us that need to get involved and make sure that our union stays democratic and is member-led. And
Superb. Well, I'm sorry that we've run out of time while we've still obviously got plenty to discuss, but I guess that's the best kind of show when we've got more to come back to, and you'll both be welcome on any time you want to come on and resume that discussion. Other than that, I will thank you for your time. Thank you for everyone who's watched. And if you watch this on catch up, thank you for that as well. Do share, do the subscription bits on your preferred social media channel. Make sure you keep up with the rest of the Socialist Telly output. And hang in there. There are rays of light, like we're seeing in the fight back in the Unison Union and in the legal eagerness of members and former members to take the party to task for the conduct of its right-wing regime. So thank you for that. I'll see you again next week on Socialist Telly, and do watch the rest of our output this week and watch the social media channels for news of what's coming. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your week.